That works too.
That works. Good morning. Investing in digital infrastructure, we know, is absolutely vital to drive our economies, for our health, for our society, but also innovation. And with me, we've got a fantastic panel. We've got Deemah, AlYahya, Secretary General, Digital Corporation Organization. We've got Michael Dyke, the CEO of New Murabba, which is a PIF-owned development company. Marc, CEO of DigitalBridge. He's been investing in digital infrastructure for over 25 years. Caspar Herzberg, CEO of AVEVA Group, who has been looking at place and how you can reshape cities. And finally, David Su, founder and managing partner of MPC Investments, and David has been investing for over 20 years in China. And so what we'll see across this discussion is really delving into the issues north, south, global south, but also software and hardware. So I'd just like to start with setting the scene. I'll come to you, Marc, because you've been deploying capital in this area for quite a long time. Where are we going in terms of the need for digital infrastructure globally at the moment?
Well, look, first of all, thank you, and a pleasure to be here with all of you. I thought I had a pretty good handle on it, and then I listened to Masa-san yesterday, and I got really scared because I thought we were building 80 gigawatts of data center capacity on a global basis, and Masa told me that we now have to build 400 gigawatts. Now, look, we only have to believe about 25% of what Masa said, and it's still a daunting challenge on a global basis. Our journey today in public cloud has taken about 13 years, and we've lit about 13 to 14 gigawatts of power on a global basis. As you know, AI needs 5 times that capacity. The limitation isn't our ability to form capital. The limitation isn't our ability to build data centers. The limitation will fundamentally be how do we get transmission of power, renewable power, and how can we continue to deliver the ecosystem around those data centers to get to the right place. And there's a lot of different supply chain issues, and we're also really confronted with how fast can we build the GPUs to power these data centers. If you and I decided to go buy GPUs from Jensen today, we'd be in line. We'd be sitting 3 to 4 years out from getting the right processors. So it's not as simple as just lighting 50 or 80 or 400 gigawatts of power. There's really an ecosystem challenge that is involved in that requires a lot of different industries that typically haven't spoken to each other to start talking the same language. And that's a lot of our challenges today in deploying the capital. We've got $30 billion of data center construction happening right now. We're building 100 data centers in 5 different continents. And I can tell you every one of those data centers has a unique challenge, but a lot of those challenges are common, and it all comes back to power. And how do we get the right power and that power density that is going to power the next generation of GPUs? So it's a big infrastructure challenge, and I think we've got some great people on it, but at the same time, make no mistake, there's a lot of work to be done in the next decade.
And just sort of push a bit or dive deeper into the data centers point. I mean, the data center need is based on how much power AI needs today. If you fast forward 10, 20 years, do you think that actually AI would need less power than it needs today, and therefore data centers may not be the big play that they need to be?
Well, I think, look, one thing that is interesting is if you look at the new NVIDIA configurations that are coming out today, we've actually deployed them at Switch in Las Vegas and in one of our data centers there. You can actually fit 1 megawatt of compute power into one rack. That used to be 5 years ago, you'd walk into a data center hall, that was over 500 racks, now consolidated into one. So what's interesting about data center evolution is more power density, less space, so they're physically taking up less space, which is interesting. But also at the same time, almost 4 to 8x the connectivity. One thing we haven't discussed is the capillaries are fiber, dark fiber. And data center connectivity today used to be our customers would take 2 to 4 pairs of dark fiber. Now customers are asking for 8, 16, 64 pairs, and not just 2 redundant paths, but you have to build 4, if not 8 redundant paths of fiber. So there's a whole nother part of this ecosystem, which is the connectivity and how we connect data centers and how we create low latency solutions to deliver the promise of these GPUs. So another complication.
Another complication indeed. David, I'm very aware that you are working with entrepreneurs on the software side mainly, and these are people who are inventing the future. So how do you see the software side tying into what Marc has been telling us around the physical infrastructure and technology needs?
So if you look at China, because I've been investing in China the last 25 years, and it really went from, China was first connected to the internet in 1994, and then, so exactly 30 years right now. And what you see is that is a vast region, right, of a very, very broad geographical connection. So after 30 years, and with mobile internet coming up on stream in 2010, today maybe 1 billion Chinese is being connected right now, and it's through the combination of fixed broadband internet and mobile internet. But even then, there's still now close to 350 million Chinese that doesn't have reliable, internet connection. I think you can cover that with the rollout of 5G and 5G Max. So we may not see the connectivity as it's a physical fiber connectivity all the way to the homes in some of these geography because it's very restricted. On the software side, I think we are pretty excited about the evolution. So we're fortunate to participate in some of the on-demand deliveries, like whether it's car dispatch or food delivery and e-commerce. I think the next wave, a lot of talks about AI. I think we're very excited about education, for example. It continues to actually, how do you deliver high quality online education, right, to vast regions, especially underdeveloped regions. I think in the first world, OECD or the G20s, many of these issues are resolved, and you need to build hyperscale data centers to train and scale that up further to solve the biggest problems that we are facing. But at the same time, we still have 2.5, close to 3 billion people that's not really connected. So I think part of that democratization of computing software and power would help solve some of these issues. So, and hopefully over the next 12, 18, 2 years, some of this AI and experts and agents become so smart that it can actually become like a teaching guru, right, to help K-12 students to learn better, and so it's a space that we're quite excited about, and of course the whole AGI, how does it solve knowledge workers' problems, and hopefully not just taking away the jobs, but really making people more productive. Yeah.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I'm curious about the point you made around a number of these issues resolved in the G20 and what the picture looks like outside of the G20. And Deemah, your organization covers 16 countries, if I remember correctly, about 800 million people. So what does this new digital world look like for the organization that you represent?
Brilliant question, Sam, and thank you for having us first, and a great welcome to everyone to Riyadh. It is actually in the forefront of what we are looking at, which is creating a resilient digital infrastructure. Now, if I would look at the advancement, as the gentleman mentioned, of digital economy, it is a very exciting time. It comes with a huge abundance of opportunity, as well as increase in productivity and also quality of life. But then if we see the spending on AI that is expected to remarkably increase by 2028 to more than 600 billion from application to infrastructure level, I come to wonder who is going to use these technologies.
Exactly.
When we are still suffering from a digital divide, we are now introducing a new divide, which is an AI divide, skills divide, and so on. If we have till now 2.6 billion people around the world that are even not connected and don't have even access to internet, you have 1.4 billion people unbanked. You have another challenge, which is not only connectivity, but reliable connectivity, affordability of devices, and also services. So here is where we really should look at the infrastructure and creating the right platforms that will enable such kind of population to thrive and innovate. That untapped offline individual is an untapped opportunity for any investment and thriving economical growth. If you see now regions that are really investing in their brain power and human capital development, you see a lot of thriving innovations coming from these areas. And here is where we always focus the attention of investors to that part of the world where it carries with it huge opportunities. We see emerging markets looking into edge computing right now, considering that it is a very exciting technology which processes data very fast and where the data is generated. So that gives a breakthrough to any community or emerging market that has challenges in broadband or lack of connectivity. If we look at challenges like AI, as we've mentioned, one AI-generated image consumes energy more than charging your smartphone. So if it's a challenge in developed countries, how are we expecting in developing countries?
Is the divide bridgeable?
Well, this is where we're looking into, we truly believe that multilateral and multi-stakeholder opportunities will bridge that gap. A competitive advantage in one country could be a solution and a challenge for another country. So while there are countries that have the capital to invest in their infrastructure, there are countries that have the brain power. So coming up with the P opportunities and new modules of collaboration between governments, private sector, and also international organizations that will help bridge that gap by creating decentralized either cloud capacities or decentralized computing power for AI. And this is something that we just launched actually in DCO, which is a Gen AI Center of Excellence in championship with our member state, which is Saudi Arabia. We're creating decentralized capacities for the rest of our member countries to utilize and create innovations and moving the population or the member states from technology users to technology producers.
Very, very, very interesting and helpful. And I think with all these conversations, it's good to try and get some real life cases. We talk about investment of billions and people who need this, great technologies of the future. But Caspar, you are an operator and you've been looking at how to reshape cities. I'd like you to give us some real examples, but also the issue of data, because underpinning all of this is data and what we do about the data that we're generating. So I'd just really like to hear the perspective of an operator on this.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, and thank you for having me here. So I think the first thing to say is that the productivity that we get from AI in the industrial space is very, very large, right? The industrial space is full of repetitive tasks. Algorithms know how to deal with repetitive tasks, so that's going to happen. Whether that is in power generation, distribution, whether that is in any type of large machines, there's a lot of energy, a lot of redundancy that can be eliminated. And I think that will form a large part of the business case, the true business case when we look back 10, 15 years from now, what really made AI work or not, it will be in the industrial space. Now, that's the first thing. The second thing to say, and it's very interesting, the focus now on the power needed, the energy needed to power data centers, right? That ultimately are the backbone, the digital infrastructure of AI. Now, the reality is that we will not be able, not everyone is going to have their SMR, their nuclear power station next to the data center. That's not going to be the norm in the world. So that means we're going to have to redirect power to these data centers, right? To the infrastructure. And that power has to be saved somewhere else. And incidentally, that is the power that will be saved by AI, especially. So there's like a virtuous circle that I see between saving power in industry, in cities, on energy distribution, not wasting power, right? Not wasting power on turbines that run because they don't have to run, right? And ultimately redirecting this power to to the digital infrastructure. Now you asked about data, and I mean, I think about data is one of those things where anything intelligent has already been said. So, but let me try anyway.
But you've lived and breathed it.
The truth is we are creating so much data, also in a redundant way, that much of it sits in data centers and isn't used. I think one figure I have in mind in the industrial space is that it's 175 zettabytes of data that's going to be industrial data created, I think, in 2025. So this is the prediction. That's a zettabyte, for those who don't know, is 21 zeros. It's significant, right? Yet only, I think it's 82% of that data is not actually ever analyzed, used. So we also, at some point, have to decide what data do we want to save and what do we not want to save. Is your 15th cat video really worth saving on 8 devices at the same time, or should we implement policies that limit a little bit what we put out there so that we have the space? Yeah, those are my 2 thoughts.
Really, very, very interesting. And Michael, I don't know whether your job is easier or more difficult because you are creating a new place. And in some ways, you've got a blank sheet of paper and you can make it what you want in New Murabba. But it would be good to get your sense of what does this mean in terms of creating place and your project.
Thank you, Sam. And to everyone, good morning. Salam alaikum. In terms of the opportunity we have, which is an amazing opportunity, but it's a harsh reality, is the fact that we have 19 square kilometers of space not very far from here, so effectively attached to Riyadh today, which is in an amazing location and part of one of the best capital cities in the world. Our task is to actually create the world's largest modern downtown. So that will be a home to 400,000 people. It will have 100,000 homes. It will have 9,000 hotel keys, 18 communities, all of whom live on a 15-minute city philosophy, which means that all those things you know and want in your downtown, whether it's convenience, whether it's education, healthcare, quality of life, or anything else for that matter, is available. Now that's the 18 communities, but at the heart of New Murabba, we have something called the Macabre, which is pound for pound the world's largest structure ever known to man or woman. And that is effectively a place which is a mixed-use asset. But essentially what makes it particularly different, which is what makes New Murabba different, is the fact that we have a very large technology play, and that's inside the Macabre. So we have to actually not only create this amazing place that people want to work, live and play, but actually a place which is fully activated inside the Macabre, which technically means 400,000 square meters of LED activated in such a way that you feel that you're in another world. You never see
But by the way, you've got an intervention coming from our AI. Yes, could we bring them on screen? Well,
may I interrupt here for a moment?
Please.
Please do.
It's already been mentioned that 2.7 billion people are still offline. And data center energy usage is set to double by 2026. Even if data centers are greener, can we ever balance digital growth with equitable, sustainable development and care of the planet?
So there we go. Can we have a greener data center revolution? I don't know whether to give it to you, Caspar, because you were at Schneider Electric before, or who on the panel would like to take that challenge?
Well, I think, look, the challenge is, I want to come back to something you said that was very interesting. We don't have a generation issue in this planet. We're generating a lot of power. There's plenty of power around the planet. The challenge is how do we rethink the transmission infrastructure. Oh, my mic's gone dead.
Yeah.
But I think that transmission infrastructure of energy we have to rethink, and that's where AI...
I think there's a hand mic coming to you, Marc. So Caspar, if your mic is working, do you want to jump in?
So I think the thing to say, should I, or do you want to continue and then I'll say something?
I think it's just, and this is also dead. But I think the point is that...
It should be working, so...
We have to rethink...
Turn it on.
Definitely not working. And I'm supposed to be the tech guy. Okay, so I think the issue is really around how do you re-engineer grids and how do you distribute power, how do you trade power, and then ultimately how can you do that in a way that's very efficient?
Okay, I think let's switch. Caspar, do go ahead.
Absolutely. So it's really a question of how to get power to everyone. I mean, this is what is at the heart of it. Now, traditionally, power was distributed by the state or by state companies, and this is still the model in much of the world, including in a lot of the countries that where there is a significant divide between people who have access and people who don't have access. So, and this is where really renewables come in, I think, at scale. We do see that in Africa. I do think that is, I used to manage Middle East and Africa before, so for Schneider, so we did a lot of projects in this space. There is enough power to make it work for both the people that don't have it and for the data centers. This is very, very true. I think it is a question of how do we distribute this power better, how do we not waste it, and how do we integrate non-renewables into the overall grid, including a lot of mini-grids that are currently just standalone. I think this is technically possible, but this is from a policy point of view often not addressed.
And that's it, microgrids,
Go on, jump
right?
in.
So microgrids are really an important part of that ecosystem. Yeah. And so a lot of the best case studies for our green data centers, really, I was in Brazil last week, and we have over 300 megawatts of power that's entirely hydro-powered. We own our own transmission infrastructure, we own our own microgrid, and we own our own batteries. We didn't like the answer we got from the national grid, so we solved the problem by going off-grid. And I think some of the things that we're doing in the States and some of the things we're doing in Europe right now, these off-grid solutions are really important because we're not just bringing power into the data center, Sam. What we're doing is also we're trading in power now. Once we have a microgrid and we deal with intermittence, we can rebalance the grid in peak hours by selling our renewable power back into the grid. And then we rebalance that grid, by the way, every 2 milliseconds using what? AI. And so this is a real case study. So Tambor, Brazil is my absolute microcosm of what the planet could look like, which is we're 100% renewable energy in Brazil. We don't use any fossil fuels, and we're powering all of the next generation, workloads using that power. Same with Reno, Nevada. We just lit another 800 megawatts of solar in Reno, Nevada. And by the way, every day we're selling 200 to 300 megawatts back into the grid, rebalancing to consumers that live in Reno and live in Las Vegas. So we can actually not only build the data centers of the future, but we can also be a good corporate citizen by putting that power back into the grid. And the only way we could do that, Sam, was by owning our own grid infrastructure. We had to go off-grid to basically effectively control our destiny. And that's kind of, I think, the future is microgrids and owning our own transmission infrastructure.
So if I'm to summarize, you were saying we can have green data centers and not sacrifice speed, performance, or profitability.
Correct.
What role do you see for the Middle East?
Yes, before that, I want to touch base on that is to make that happen or to make it successful, no country can work alone. So therefore, to transform that energy, not in one nation, but cross-border, we need right agile and nimble policy frameworks. And this is where policymakers strive to find the balance between safeguarding and protecting the national sovereignty, but at the same time creating a thriving and stimulus digital economy. So I truly believe that when it comes to policies, we have to start innovating in policy making, especially when it comes to transferring energy or either cross-border data flows as well. If we look and laser focus on the Middle East, and I would especially focus on the Gulf, see there is a huge lucrative opportunity here for the Gulf.
I thought you were going to say that.
Yeah, for the GCC to become a powerhouse when it comes to digital innovation. Considering the geographic location, which is between connecting Asia, Europe, and Africa together, as well as the robust and resilient infrastructure. If we look from a connectivity perspective, the submarine cables, as well as the cloud computing, and where GCC is heavily investing in cloud computing. In another angle, which is really important, financial platforms, where it is very robust, that can support and help other countries in terms of their transformation. What we really need to focus on is the brain power when it comes to moving the 60% of IT graduates to a 30%, moving them from job seekers to job creators, and creating that thriving innovation ecosystem that would be attracting all investments and venture capitals. In a time where we see political struggles all around the GCC can be the beacon of motivation and economical growth for the region.
So a few questions coming up. Open to the panel. What do governments need to do to be truly competitive in this space? Who would take that?
Tax credits.
Well, I can.
Tax credits are the first. If you want to incentivize us to go build $1 billion or $2 billion data center, give us a tax incentive scheme. I'll come back to Reno, Nevada again. Why did we move out of Silicon Valley, and why are we building 3.6 gigawatts of compute power in Reno? It's less than 1 millisecond from Silicon Valley, and we have no taxes. We literally have a tax abatement scheme on that entire campus. It's the largest data center campus in the United States, and we won't pay real estate taxes for 20 years, where you go into California and they were overtaxing. If you make it easy, people will invest. You have to create that right incentive. The same thing on the power. If we're being a good citizen, we're putting power back into the grid, incentivize us. Create the right incentives where you can create that public partnership with private enterprise where you want to invest. I think the countries that are doing that are the countries that are going to win and advance at the end of the day. We're all economically motivated at the end of the day. We want to do the right thing for the planet, but at the same time, there has to be the right set of incentives.
We're all economically motivated, as you say, but sovereignty has also become a big issue around AI, data, digital infrastructure. And David, I just want to know from your point of view of sort of backing the companies of the future, what are the ways we can go about avoiding sort of a splinter net, as it's often called?
Well, I think the world is already splintering, right? So, if you look at the technology, I think NVIDIA and Jensen talk about sovereign AI, and in a way, I think it's a fairly novel concept, which is basically one of the key issues is that every country or every organization are just super laser focused about, data integrity, ownership of it. And we see a lot of innovation, actually coming out from the cybersecurity and of course, kind of localizing your data compute, right? So, I'm originally from Singapore, so Singapore is very big on national AI agenda, so making sure that even though it partners with the Americans and then also the Chinese and different parts, but a lot of core data security are really localized into Singapore, right? So the same is true for US, same for China, and I'm sure in many countries in the world. So I'm not worried about kind of the innovation around this whole space. I think there's a lot of political will and capabilities spread around the world that does it. I think it's difficult when you try to partner different regions, when they force you to choose, right? Like you either have to work with us or you don't work with, you can't work with the other guy, then it becomes tricky, and I think most of the countries in the world are non-aligned and neutral, and also therefore how do you work with great powers of the world, but doing it well, without antagonizing the system. Yeah.
Very good. Michael, we've talked about AI. Funnily enough, we haven't touched on cloud. Any other technologies out there that we should be thinking about in terms of the future?
So I think from our perspective, we want to have a city that's born smart. So what we've heard today is actually applications whereby you're having to retrofit and apply sort of backfitting to existing environments. And Singapore is a great example of a job well done there. But for us, we have the ability to try to create the physical space which can cope with things that we don't know about today. Because one thing we know for certain is in 2035, there will be tech, there will be spatial requirements that we do not know today. So for us, ultimately, we need to create that space and that opportunity. And I think to your specific question, immersive tech is becoming extremely big. The ability to interact with immersive tech and how that may connect with AI and Gen AI in the future becomes a big opportunity.
thank you. Fantastic conversation. Enjoyed it very much. I'm sure our audience did, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.